The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus Johnson pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of the Cook County Courthouse. It was just past midnight, and the building stood silent except for the soft squeak of his wheels and the distant sound of the night guard making his rounds. Marcus liked working the night shift. At 42, he had been cleaning these halls for nearly 8 years, and he preferred the quiet solitude to the daytime chaos of lawyers, defendants, and judges rushing between courtrooms. Tonight, like most nights, he worked methodically, taking pride in how the marble floors gleamed under his careful attention. "Evening, Marcus," called Officer Reyes, the night security guard. "Evening, sir," Marcus replied with a nod, his voice soft but respectful. What Officer Reyes and the others who worked in the courthouse didn't know was that Marcus Johnson was much more than a janitor. Behind his humble demeanor and work uniform was a mind that absorbed legal knowledge like a sponge. Every night, after finishing his assigned floors, Marcus would unlock the law library with the master key he'd been trusted with. He was supposed to simply empty the trash bins and vacuum between the massive bookshelves. Instead, he would spend an extra hour, sometimes 2, sitting in the corner with thick law books spread before him. Tonight was no different. After completing his regular duties, Marcus settled into his favorite corner of the library. He pulled out a worn notebook filled with his neat handwriting and opened a heavy volume on constitutional law. The path that led Marcus to this secret routine began 10 years ago when his younger brother James was wrongfully convicted of armed robbery. The public defender assigned to James had been overworked and underprepared. Marcus watched helplessly as his brother was sentenced to 15 years, despite significant problems with the evidence. "I promise I'll get you out," Marcus had told James during his first prison visit. But as a high school graduate with no college education, Marcus had no idea how to keep that promise until he started working at the courthouse. What began as curiosity had turned into an obsession. Marcus read everything he could find: case law, legal dictionaries, constitutional amendments, and Supreme Court decisions. He took meticulous notes and taught himself legal terminology. He didn't just memorize information, he understood it, connecting concepts and identifying patterns that even trained lawyers sometimes missed. Marcus flipped through his notebook to a section where he'd analyzed recent Supreme Court decisions on evidence standards. His understanding of precedent and legal reasoning had grown sophisticated over the years. Sometimes, listening to arguments in the courtrooms he cleaned, he could spot flaws in logic that the attorneys themselves overlooked. As the clock approached 3 a.m., Marcus reluctantly closed his books and returned them carefully to their proper places. He had to finish cleaning the East Wing before his shift ended at 5 a.m. Walking down the dim hallway, he passed Courtroom 7, where Judge William Harrington presided. Marcus slowed his pace, remembering how the judge had spoken to him yesterday, sharp and dismissive, as if Marcus were invisible. It wasn't the first time Judge Harrington had treated the cleaning staff with barely concealed contempt. Marcus sighed and continued pushing his cart. Little did Judge Harrington know that the man he dismissed as just a janitor understood the law almost as well as he did, perhaps in some ways even better. Tomorrow, Marcus would return to his hidden studies. For now, he had floors to clean and trash to collect. His time would come, though he had no idea how soon that would be. The following week brought unusual activity to the courthouse. A high-profile death penalty case had landed on Judge Harrington's docket, and the media circus was in full swing. Even during the night shift, Marcus could feel the tension lingering in the air. On Thursday night, Marcus was polishing the wooden benches in Courtroom 7 when he heard voices coming from Judge Harrington's chambers. The door was slightly ajar, and light spilled into the darkened courtroom. "This Washington case is going to be a nightmare." Judge Harrington's voice carried through the gap. "The media's all over it." Marcus slowed his movements, careful not to make noise. He recognized the case they were discussing. Terrell Washington was a young black man accused of murdering a prominent business owner. The case had racial undertones that had divided the city. "The defense is arguing that the evidence was improperly obtained," said another voice, probably the judge's clerk, Jason. "They can argue whatever they want," Judge Harrington replied with a laugh. "That Supreme Court ruling from last year gives us plenty of room to dismiss their motion." Marcus froze. He knew exactly which ruling the judge was referring to, and Harrington had it completely backward. The Barnes v. Missouri decision had actually strengthened protections against certain types of searches, not weakened them. Without thinking, Marcus moved closer to the door. Through the crack, he could see Judge Harrington leaning back in his leather chair, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. Jason sat across from him, looking uncomfortable but nodding along. "Sir, I need to finish cleaning in here," Marcus said, knocking gently on the door. Judge Harrington looked up, annoyed. "Can't you come back later? We're discussing important matters." "Sorry, sir. Building supervisor wants this floor done by midnight," Marcus replied politely. The judge sighed dramatically. "Fine, be quick about it." Marcus entered with his cleaning cart and began emptying the trash bins. As he worked, the conversation resumed. "As I was saying," continued the judge, "the Barnes ruling clearly supports our position." Marcus couldn't help himself. "Excuse me, Your Honor," he said quietly, "but I think Barnes v. Missouri actually ruled the opposite way." The room fell silent. Judge Harrington slowly turned to face Marcus, his expression a mixture of shock and anger. "What did you just say?" the judge asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "The Barnes decision," Marcus continued, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "The Supreme Court ruled 7-2 that evidence obtained during traffic stops cannot be used if the stop was extended without reasonable suspicion." Jason's eyes widened, but he quickly looked down at his papers. Judge Harrington's face flushed red. "Are you seriously trying to lecture me on the law? You, the janitor?" Marcus knew he had crossed a line, but something in him wouldn't back down. "I just thought." "You thought?" Harrington cut him off, standing up. "That's your problem right there. Nobody pays you to think. They pay you to clean toilets and empty trash." A woman sitting in the corner, whom Marcus hadn't noticed before, looked up from her notebook. She had a press badge clipped to her blouse. "Stick to emptying trash cans. That's all you'll ever be good for." Harrington continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Now finish up and get out." Marcus felt his face burn with humiliation, but he kept his expression neutral. "Yes, Your Honor. Sorry to interrupt." He finished his cleaning in silence, aware of the journalist watching him with curious eyes. As he pushed his cart out of the chambers, he heard the judge mutter, "The nerve of these people." Walking down the empty hallway, Marcus's embarrassment gave way to determination. He knew the law, and he knew Judge Harrington was wrong. For the first time, he wondered if there might be a way to use his knowledge to make a difference, not just for his brother, but for Terrell Washington too. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his small apartment, the judge's words echoing in his mind. "Stick to emptying trash cans. That's all you'll ever be good for." The memory stung, but it wasn't just his wounded pride that kept him awake. It was the thought of Terrell Washington, a young man whose fate might depend on a legal error. At dawn, Marcus gave up on sleep and made himself strong coffee. He spread his legal notebooks across his kitchen table and flipped to his detailed notes on Barnes v. Missouri. Yes, he was right. The Supreme Court had specifically ruled that extended traffic stops without reasonable suspicion violated Fourth Amendment rights. Marcus's phone buzzed with a news alert. He picked it up and saw the headline, "Washington Death Penalty Case, Key Evidence Hearing Today." The article mentioned that Judge William Harrington would be deciding whether crucial evidence would be admitted, evidence obtained during an extended traffic stop. "This isn't right," Marcus whispered to himself. Later that morning, instead of going to bed as he usually did after his night shift, Marcus returned to the courthouse. He wore civilian clothes, clean jeans and a button-up shirt, and sat in the back row of courtroom 7, just another observer among the packed gallery. Terrell Washington sat beside his public defender, a young woman who looked overwhelmed by the high-profile case. Terrell was only 23, not much older than Marcus's brother had been when he was wrongfully convicted. Something about his scared eyes and straight posture reminded Marcus painfully of James. The prosecutor, a confident man in an expensive suit, argued that the gun found in Terrell's car during a traffic stop should be admissible as evidence. The officer had reasonable suspicion when he extended the stop to search the vehicle, he claimed. Terrell's defender stood up nervously. "Your Honor, under Barnes v. Missouri, the evidence should be excluded." The officer admitted he extended the stop based only on a feeling, not any actual suspicious behavior. Marcus leaned forward, waiting for the judge to acknowledge the clear precedent. Instead, Judge Harrington frowned. Barnes v. Missouri focused on drugs, not weapons, the judge stated incorrectly. The public safety exception clearly applies here. Marcus felt his stomach drop. There was no such distinction in the Barnes ruling. The judge was either deliberately misrepresenting the law or genuinely mistaken. Either way, Terrell Washington would suffer the consequences. The public defender looked confused. Your Honor, I don't believe that's the correct interpretation of. I've made my ruling, Counselor. Judge Harrington interrupted sharply. The evidence is admissible. We'll proceed to trial next week. The gavel came down with finality. Terrell's shoulders slumped, and his attorney whispered something to him that didn't seem to offer much comfort. As people began filing out of the courtroom, Marcus noticed the same journalist from the previous night taking notes in the corner. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave him a curious look, clearly recognizing him from the judge's chambers. Outside the courthouse, Marcus stood in the sunshine, feeling the weight of what he had just witnessed. A man's life hung in the balance because of a legal error. An error Marcus knew how to fix. Walking home, Marcus called his brother's prison and left a message canceling his visit that weekend. Something important came up, James. I think I might be able to help someone the way I couldn't help you back then. That evening, Marcus pulled out his old laptop and began typing. He wasn't just a janitor. He had spent thousands of hours studying the law, and now someone's life depended on that knowledge. If the judge wouldn't listen to him directly, maybe there was another way to make his voice heard. The Barnes precedent was clear. The evidence should be thrown out. Somehow, Marcus had to make sure the truth was known before an innocent man was sentenced to death. For the next 3 days, Marcus barely slept. His small apartment transformed into a makeshift legal office. Law books borrowed from the public library stacked on every surface, legal pads filled with his neat handwriting, and printouts of case law spread across the floor. His laptop remained open on his kitchen table, the document growing longer as he typed with 2 fingers, slowly but deliberately. What had started as a simple correction of Judge Harrington's misinterpretation had evolved into a comprehensive amicus brief, a friend of the court filing that anyone with relevant expertise could submit in a case. This is crazy, Marcus muttered to himself on the 3rd night, rubbing his tired eyes. Who am I to think I can do this? He glanced at the framed photo of his brother James, now serving his 10th year for a crime he didn't commit. The memory of his promise gave him strength to continue. Marcus had never written a formal legal document before, but he had read hundreds of them. He knew the structure, the language, the way arguments should be built on precedent and logic. His brief methodically dismantled Judge Harrington's reasoning about the Barnes decision, citing not just the majority opinion, but also concurring statements that made it crystal clear. The ruling applied to all extended stops, not just drug cases. When he finished at 4 a.m. on the 3rd night, he read through all 22 pages one last time. Despite his lack of formal education, Marcus knew his argument was solid, but a nagging doubt remained. Who would take a janitor's legal brief seriously? At work that night, Marcus moved through his cleaning routine mechanically, his mind elsewhere. As he emptied the trash in one of the court clerk offices, he noticed a young woman working late, surrounded by case files. He recognized her as Lisa Chen, a new clerk who had always greeted him kindly. Unlike most of the courthouse staff, she treated the cleaning crew with respect. Working late, Miss Chen? Marcus asked as he collected her trash. This Washington case has everyone scrambling, she sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. Such a mess. Marcus hesitated, then took a risk. Can I ask you something about that case? Hypothetically. Lisa looked surprised but nodded. If someone outside the legal team noticed a serious error in the judge's interpretation of precedent, what could they do? Well, Lisa said thoughtfully, anyone can submit an amicus brief, though they're usually from legal organizations or experts. She studied Marcus's face. Why do you ask? Marcus took a deep breath. Because Judge Harrington is wrong about Barnes v. Missouri, and a man's life is at stake. To his surprise, Lisa didn't dismiss him. Instead, she leaned forward. Tell me more. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus explained the legal problem as Lisa listened with increasing interest. When he finished, she was staring at him with new respect. You really know your stuff, she said. Where did you go to law school? Marcus gestured to his janitor's uniform. The School of Life. I've been studying law on my own for years. Lisa sat back, digesting this information. You've written this brief already? Marcus nodded. But who would take it seriously coming from me? Lisa thought for a moment. What if I submitted it for you? Anonymously, of course. It could be attributed to a concerned legal scholar. Hope flickered in Marcus's chest. You would do that? If your analysis is as good as it sounds, absolutely. The point of our legal system is justice, not credentials. The next morning, Marcus handed Lisa a USB drive containing his brief. I can't thank you enough, he said. Don't thank me yet, she replied. This is a long shot, but it's worth trying. That afternoon, while Marcus slept, Lisa submitted the document to the court. As a respected clerk, her transmission of the brief raised no eyebrows, though its source remained a mystery. As Marcus dreamed, his words, carefully crafted during those sleepless nights, began their journey through the legal system. His knowledge, hidden for so long behind a janitor's uniform, was finally stepping into the light. What would happen next was beyond his control, but Marcus had done something he'd never done before. He had taken action instead of just watching injustice unfold. The courthouse buzzed with unusual energy when Marcus arrived for his shift the following Monday. Attorneys huddled in corners, speaking in hushed tones. Court clerks darted between offices with urgent expressions. Something big had happened. Did you hear? Whispered Miguel, another janitor on the night crew. Some mystery legal expert wrote a paper that's got everyone talking. Something about the Washington case. Marcus kept his face neutral as he adjusted his cleaning gloves. Really? What's it about? Don't know exactly, Miguel shrugged. But they say Judge Harrington is furious. As Marcus pushed his cart toward the administrative offices, he spotted Lisa Chen coming out of a conference room. When she saw him, she quickly approached. It's causing quite a stir, she whispered, eyes bright with excitement. The state Supreme Court has ordered a special hearing on the evidence question. They specifically cited the anonymous brief's analysis of Barnesville, Missouri. Marcus felt a rush of both pride and fear. What happens now? Judge Harrington has been ordered to appear and explain his ruling, Lisa replied. And here's the interesting part. The Chief Justice called the brief a remarkably clear analysis that cuts through years of confusion on this precedent. Before Marcus could respond, a loud voice echoed down the hallway. I want to know who wrote it. Judge Harrington was shouting as he emerged from his chambers, face flushed with anger. Some coward hiding behind anonymity thinks they know better than me. Marcus quickly ducked his head and busied himself with emptying a nearby trash can. The judge stormed past without noticing him. Later that night, as Marcus cleaned the law library, he found a copy of his brief lying on a table. Several passages had been highlighted, with notes scribbled in the margins like brilliant and compelling logic. Seeing his own words taken so seriously gave him a feeling he'd never experienced before. 2 days later, the courthouse was packed for the special hearing. Marcus called in sick for his night shift, something he'd never done in 8 years of employment, so he could attend. He sat in the very back row, nearly hidden behind a column. The hearing began with the Chief Justice addressing the court. We're here to review the evidentiary ruling in Washington v. State, particularly in light of new analysis regarding the application of Barnesville, Missouri. Judge Harrington sat at a table alone, looking uncomfortable in the position of having to defend himself. Your Honor, the Chief Justice continued, can you explain why you ruled that Barnes doesn't apply to weapons seizures, when the majority opinion clearly states it applies to any evidence obtained during an improperly extended stop? Judge Harrington shifted in his seat. I believe the public safety exception was relevant in this case. But the anonymous brief cites 3 passages from Justice Coleman's majority opinion that explicitly reject that interpretation, pressed another justice. As the questioning continued, it became clear that Judge Harrington couldn't adequately defend his position against the anonymous brief's arguments. Finally, the Chief Justice asked, does anyone know the identity of the brief's author? The court would like to acknowledge this contribution. A murmur ran through the courtroom. In the silence that followed, Marcus felt his heart pounding. Then to his horror, he saw Lisa Chen slowly stand. Your Honor, she said clearly, I submitted the brief, but I didn't write it. All eyes turned to her. The author is a man who has studied law independently for years. He works in this very courthouse, but not as an attorney. Marcus sank lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear. His name is Marcus Johnson, Lisa continued, and he's a member of the night cleaning staff. Gasps filled the courtroom. Judge Harrington's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Marcus in the back row. Recognition dawned on the judge's face, followed by utter disbelief. The janitor he had mocked and dismissed was the legal mind who had just challenged him before the state Supreme Court. And won. The courtroom fell silent as all eyes turned to search for Marcus Johnson. Feeling exposed and vulnerable, Marcus slowly stood up, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. "Is this true?" the Chief Justice asked, peering over her glasses at him. "Are you the author of this brief, Mr. Johnson?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice stronger than he expected. "I wrote it." Judge Harrington's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is preposterous. He's a janitor, for God's sake." "A janitor who appears to understand Barnes v. Missouri better than you do, Judge Harrington," replied the Chief Justice, her voice stern. "Mr. Johnson, would you please approach the bench?" Walking down the center aisle felt like the longest journey of Marcus's life. He could feel the weight of hundreds of stares, attorneys, clerks, reporters, and courthouse staff who had only ever seen him emptying their trash bins. As he passed the defense table, he briefly made eye contact with Terrell Washington, who looked back at him with a mixture of confusion and hope. "Mr. Johnson," the Chief Justice said when he reached the front, "would you explain to the court how you came to write this brief?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I've been studying law for 10 years, Your Honor. My younger brother was wrongfully convicted, and I promised to help him. I work nights at the courthouse and spend my free time in the law library." "And you have no formal legal education?" asked another justice, clearly impressed. "No, Your Honor. Just books and determination." A reporter from the Chicago Tribune was furiously taking notes. Beside her sat the same female journalist who had witnessed Judge Harrington mocking Marcus in his chambers that night. "Mr. Johnson," the Chief Justice continued, "would you walk us through your analysis of Barnes as it applies to this case?" For the next 15 minutes, Marcus explained his reasoning with remarkable clarity. Years of private study had given him a unique perspective, unclouded by conventional legal education. He spoke simply but precisely, citing cases from memory and explaining complex legal concepts in accessible language. When he finished, the courtroom remained silent for several seconds. Then one of the justices began to applaud, followed quickly by others until most of the room had joined in. Judge Harrington, however, stood up abruptly. "This is a mockery of our legal system. Are we really going to let an untrained janitor dictate legal precedent?" The female journalist stood up from her seat. "Your Honor, if I may. My name is Sophia Washington, from the Chicago Defender. I witnessed Judge Harrington belittling Mr. Johnson in his chambers last week when Mr. Johnson correctly pointed out the judge's misinterpretation of Barnes." She held up her recorder. "I have the full exchange recorded, including Judge Harrington telling Mr. Johnson, and I quote, 'Stick to emptying trash cans. That's all you'll ever be good for.'" Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Judge Harrington's face now showed the first signs of genuine fear. "Furthermore," Sophie continued, "I've spent the last week investigating Mr. Johnson's background. His brother James Johnson was convicted in 2014 in a case with striking similarities to Terrell Washington's, including questionable evidence from an extended traffic stop." The Chief Justice's expression hardened. "Judge Harrington, in light of this new information, this court is ordering a full review of your handling of the Washington case. Furthermore, we're initiating a judicial conduct investigation regarding potential bias in your courtroom." Judge Harrington sputtered. "This is outrageous. One janitor writes a fancy paper and suddenly I'm under investigation." "No," replied the Chief Justice firmly. "You're under investigation because you appear to have deliberately misapplied legal precedent and displayed both classist and potentially racist bias in your courtroom. Mr. Johnson's brief simply brought it to light." As court officers approached Judge Harrington, he turned to face Marcus, their eyes meeting directly for the first time. "You," he said, his voice barely audible, "you did this to me." Marcus shook his head. "No, Your Honor. You did this to yourself. I just knew the law." As Judge Harrington was escorted from the courtroom, Terrell Washington's attorney immediately stood to request a dismissal of charges based on the inadmissible evidence. The path to justice, for Terrell, and perhaps eventually for Marcus's brother, had finally begun to clear. The story of Marcus Johnson, the janitor turned legal scholar, exploded across Chicago news outlets the next morning. Courthouse custodian outsmarts judge, read the Tribune headline. The Chicago Defender went with justice mopped up. Black janitor's legal brilliance exposes judicial bias. For Marcus, the sudden attention was overwhelming. After years of invisibility, being recognized everywhere he went felt strange and uncomfortable. Reporters camped outside his modest apartment building, hoping for interviews. His phone rang constantly with calls from TV producers, book agents, and law firms. "I don't want fame," Marcus told Lisa Chen over coffee at a small diner far from the courthouse. "I just wanted to help Terrell Washington." "Well, you did that," Lisa replied with a smile. "The charges against him were dismissed yesterday. But Marcus, you've done something much bigger too. You've shown that justice doesn't belong only to those with fancy degrees." 3 days after the hearing, Marcus received an official letter from Northwestern University School of Law. With trembling hands, he opened it to find an offer of a full scholarship. "We believe your exceptional understanding of constitutional law and your dedication to justice represent qualities we seek in our students," the letter read. "Your life experience would bring a valuable perspective to our program." That same week, Judge Harrington faced his own reckoning. The Judicial Review Board placed him on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Local activists used the case to highlight long-standing concerns about bias in the criminal justice system. Boxes of Judge Harrington's past rulings were being reviewed, with disturbing patterns beginning to emerge. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was surprised to receive a call from his brother's attorney. "We're filing a motion for a new trial, Marcus," the lawyer explained excitedly. "The judge who handled James's case had many similar rulings to Harrington. Your case has opened the door for us to challenge the conviction based on judicial bias." For the first time in 10 years, Marcus felt real hope for his brother's freedom. The courthouse had changed too. When Marcus returned to collect his final paycheck, the staff who had previously looked through him now greeted him by name. The chief judge herself asked to meet with him. "Mr. Johnson," she said when he entered her office, "we owe you an apology for how you were treated here. But we also owe you our gratitude for exposing a serious problem in our courthouse." She gestured to a thick binder on her desk. "We're implementing new training for all judges and staff on implicit bias and respectful treatment of everyone who works in or visits this building." Marcus nodded, touched by the sincere effort, but aware that institutional change would take more than one training program. Perhaps the most surprising development came 2 weeks later. Marcus received a letter with Judge Harrington's return address. He almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. "Mr. Johnson," the letter began formally, "I have had much time to reflect on our interactions and my behavior. While words cannot undo the disrespect I showed you, I want you to know that I am truly sorry. My arrogance prevented me from seeing your intelligence and humanity." The judge went on to explain that he had enrolled in diversity training and was meeting with community leaders to better understand the impact of his biases on the cases he had handled. "Your legal analysis was correct," the letter concluded. "I was wrong, both about the law and about you." Marcus read the letter twice, unsure how to feel about this unexpected apology. People could change, he believed that, but real transformation required more than words on paper. As summer turned to fall, Marcus prepared for his first day of law school. Standing before the mirror in a new button-down shirt, he barely recognized himself. The janitor's uniform was gone, but he promised himself never to forget the perspective it had given him. "The law needs people who've seen its failures up close," he told his reflection. "And I've been watching for a very long time." 3 years passed like a whirlwind. Marcus Johnson sat in the small preparation room of the Cook County Courthouse, straightening his tie and reviewing his notes one last time. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to argue his first case as a licensed attorney in the same building he had once cleaned. "You ready for this?" asked Terrell Washington, now working as a paralegal at the same public defender's office where Marcus had been hired after graduating from Northwestern Law with honors. Marcus nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The path hadn't been easy. Law school at age 43 was challenging, especially while advocating for his brother's case and managing the occasional media attention that still followed him. But today marked the culmination of a journey that had begun in the quiet hours of the night, studying law books while others slept. The courtroom's packed, Terrell warned. Lots of law students and community members came to see you. Marcus took a deep breath. Let's not keep them waiting then. They walked together into courtroom 7, the same room where their stories had intersected 3 years earlier. The familiar smell of wood polish and old books brought back memories of pushing his cleaning cart through these aisles. What was unfamiliar was sitting at the defense table rather than emptying its trash can. Marcus placed his files neatly before him and turned to offer a reassuring smile to his client, a young woman accused of a crime she didn't commit. "All rise," called the bailiff. "The Honorable William Harrington presiding." A murmur rippled through the courtroom as Judge Harrington entered. Many were surprised to see him assigned to Marcus's first case. After a year-long suspension and mandatory sensitivity training, he had returned to the bench a changed man, not perfect, but working daily to overcome the biases that had once defined his judgments. As the proceedings began, Marcus noticed his former co-workers from the night cleaning crew sitting together in the back row. They had taken their break to come support him. Among them was Miguel, who now attended night classes at the community college, inspired by Marcus's example. In the middle row sat Marcus's brother James, finally free after serving nearly 12 years for a crime he didn't commit. His case had been one of dozens reopened following the investigation into judicial misconduct. Now he worked with a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people rebuild their lives. "Counselor Johnson, you may present your opening statement," Judge Harrington said, making deliberate eye contact with Marcus, a small gesture of respect that would have been unimaginable 3 years ago. "Thank you, Your Honor," Marcus replied, standing tall in his new role. As he addressed the jury, Marcus spoke with the clear, straightforward logic that had made his anonymous brief so powerful. He didn't use fancy language or legal jargon. Instead, he explained the case in terms anyone could understand, drawing on his unique perspective as someone who had seen the legal system from multiple angles. Halfway through his argument, Marcus glanced at the judge's bench. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Judge Harrington gave him a small nod, acknowledgement of how far they had both come. The courthouse had changed too. Following Marcus's case, the chief judge had implemented a scholarship program for courthouse staff interested in legal education. 2 security guards and a clerk were currently attending law school part-time. The building that had once been so rigidly hierarchical was slowly becoming more inclusive. When Marcus finished his opening statement, his client squeezed his arm gratefully. Win or lose, she knew she had an attorney who truly understood what it meant to fight against the odds. As Marcus returned to his seat, he caught sight of the plaque that had been installed in the courthouse lobby last year. It quoted his now famous words from the hearing that had changed everything. "Justice doesn't depend on titles or uniforms. It depends on truth." The janitor who was once told to stick to emptying trash cans had transformed not just his own life, but an entire system. Not through dramatic revolution, but through the quiet power of knowledge, persistence, and an unwavering belief that everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not what they do for a living.